The night Declan Holt came home early from Vancouver. He wasn't supposed to be there at all. His flight had been rescheduled, a mechanical delay that pushed his connection forward by 6 hours. And he had almost called ahead. He had his phone in his hand, thumb hovering over his wife's name, when something stopped him. He couldn't explain it. A quiet instinct. The kind you learn not to ignore after enough years of not listening to it. He set the phone face down on the seatback tray, and watched the dark water of the Strait of Georgia disappear beneath the clouds. The house was a 1920s Tudor revival in Rockcliffe Park, the kind of Ottawa neighborhood where old money kept the lawns immaculate and the blinds drawn. Declan had grown up in a row house in Vanier, 7 minutes east and a world apart. His wife Maisie had grown up in this house. After her parents passed, they'd moved in together. It made sense at the time. Financially, logistically, in all the ways that practical decisions make sense before you understand what they will cost you. Declan's mother had moved into the East Wing 3 years ago, when his father died and the condo in the Glebe became too quiet. He had asked Maisie before he offered. She had said yes and he had believed her. He let himself in through the side entrance at 9:30. The house was lit but quiet. The way a house is quiet when someone inside is being careful not to make noise. He heard his mother's voice before he saw anything. He heard Maisie's silence before he heard that. The sound was coming from the kitchen. Not the main kitchen, but the smaller one off the back corridor, where the caterers used to stage when the Fontaine family still threw parties. Declan moved toward it without thinking. Briefcase still in hand, jacket still on. The way you move when your body understands something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. His mother, Iris Holt, was standing at the center of the room. Maisie was near the window, one hand resting on the edge of the counter, the other pressed flat against her abdomen the way she had been doing for weeks, a habit she developed somewhere in the second trimester, a small unconscious gesture of protection. Iris was not shouting. Iris never shouted. That was the thing about her. She had always understood that the most damaging things can be said in a perfectly measured tone. She was speaking in the voice she used for board meetings and dinner parties, the voice that sounded reasonable to anyone who didn't know her. "You come from nothing," Iris said. "And I need you to understand that I remember that even when my son forgets it, even when he's being very, very generous." Maisie didn't move. She was looking at a point somewhere past Iris's shoulder, her jaw set, her eyes dry. "The child changes nothing about the fundamental arrangement here," Iris continued. "This is still my family's home. These are still my family's decisions. And you are still, at the end of it, a guest." Declan stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds before either of them noticed him. He had met Maisie Fontaine at a municipal heritage board meeting in 2016. The last kind of place he ever expected to meet someone he'd want to know better. She was an architectural preservationist with strong opinions about pre-war brickwork and absolutely no interest in being impressed. He was 34 and had just made partner at the firm and thought far too much of himself. She had corrected him, politely but without any softness, in front of 6 city councilors and a notary public. He had asked for her card on the way out. She had given it to him with the expression of someone who didn't quite believe he'd earned it yet. He spent the next 4 months earning it. They were married in 2019, a small ceremony at a vineyard in Prince Edward County, the last good autumn before everything changed. His mother had come. She had smiled in every photograph. She had given a toast that managed to say nothing warm while sounding perfectly gracious. He had told himself it was nerves, that she would come around, that people changed when they saw their children happy. He had been wrong about all of it. Standing in the doorway with his briefcase in his hand and his flight tag still on his jacket, Declan Holt understood, with a clarity that felt almost physical like cold water, how wrong he had been and for how long. Iris turned when she heard him. Her expression rearranged itself in less than a second, a skill she'd perfected over 50 years of social performance. Concern reeked cold. The corners of her mouth softened. She opened her hands. "Declan, you're home early, we weren't expecting you." He looked at his wife. Maisie had not moved. She was looking at him now, and there was something in her face that he hadn't seen before. Not anger, not relief, not the fragile hope of someone waiting to be rescued. It was something quieter and more troubling than any of those things. It was the look of a woman who had stopped expecting much. "I heard you," Declan said. Iris tilted her head. "We were just talking. I heard what you said to her, Declan. I heard all of it." The silence that followed was the kind that changes things. Not a pause, not a breath. A full and permanent silence. The kind that divides a conversation into before and after. Maisie looked at the floor. Just briefly. Then she looked back up. Iris sat her hands clasped in front of her. She had the bearing of a woman accustomed to waiting out difficult moments. Certain that they would pass and that she would still be standing on the other side of them. "You must be exhausted. The flights from Vancouver are terrible this time of year. Let me." "Don't." His voice was quiet. He was surprised by how quiet it was. "Don't manage this. Don't manage me." Iris's expression shifted again. Smaller now, the particular compression of someone who has been caught and is recalibrating. "I was simply having a frank conversation with Maisie about expectations. We've needed to do that for some time. What expectations? About her role here, about the kind of family this is. Declan set his briefcase down on the counter slowly. He was buying himself time, not for anger. The anger had arrived quickly and then gone cold, but to say the right thing rather than the loudest thing. He had learned that from Maisie. He had watched her do it for years without understanding what it cost her. Her role, he said. She's my wife. She's carrying our child. This is her home. This house, Iris said with a precise and careful emphasis, belonged to my family's connections long before. This house belonged to the Fontaine estate, Declan said. Maisie inherited it from her parents, who are both gone, and who, from everything I've ever been told, built something from nothing in this city when nobody gave them a reason to expect anything would come of it. He looked at Maisie when he said it. She was very still. I've been hearing things, he said to her, not to his mother, to her. From Joanna at the office. From Terence. Small things, things I didn't connect. I didn't want to be the kind of person who jumps to. He stopped, started again. I should have asked you directly. I should have asked months ago. Maisie's voice was even. Not cold, not warm. Calibrated in the way of someone who has learned to protect themselves by not reaching too far in either direction. There are things I didn't tell you. I didn't want to put you in the middle. I was always in the middle, Declan said. I just wasn't looking at it. Something crossed her face then. Fast, like light shifting. And it was gone before he could name it, but he thought it was relief. The kind that comes not from being rescued but from being finally, actually seen. Iris stood very straight. I see that this is a conversation the two of you need to have privately. I'll leave you to it. You're not leaving, Declan said. We're going to finish this here. She paused. That pause meant something. It meant that he had surprised her, and that Iris Holt was not accustomed to being surprised by her own son. There are a few things I need to understand, Declan said. Starting with the estate solicitor. Iris didn't answer. Joanna mentioned, he said, that she'd received a call from a man named Whitmore who works for Dunmore and Kessler, asking about the Fontaine property records. Specifically about any easement documentation from 2007. He paused. Why would anyone connected to you be making inquiries about Maisie's family's property, mother? The kitchen was very quiet. The Fontaine family, Declan continued, and his voice had gone entirely level now, the way it went in depositions, had a business partnership with my father, a long time ago. I knew about a property deal in the late 90s. My father mentioned it once, years ago. He called it the best investment he'd ever made and then never mentioned it again. He looked at Iris. He never mentioned it again because you asked him not to, didn't you? Iris said nothing. The Fontaine family held a partial stake in the Chambertin development, the one that made the first real money for Holt Capital. His voice didn't rise. Maisie's parents had a stake, and when they died, both of them, 18 months apart, the documentation supporting that stake went missing from the estate filing. That's a serious accusation, Iris said quietly. I'm not accusing you of anything yet. I'm telling you what I've had our solicitor's office looking into for the past 3 weeks. He waited. Do you want to tell Maisie what happened, or do you want me to? Iris pressed her lips together. There was a long silence, the kind in which everything that had been true for a long time stays true and just becomes impossible to look away from. Your father made a poor decision, Iris said finally. He was sentimental about people who were not in a position to protect our family's interests. The partnership was informal. There was no formal instrument. There were 3 letters, Maisie said. Her voice was very quiet. My mother kept copies in a cedar box in the attic. Declan looked at her. I found them 8 months ago, Maisie said. When I was going through her things. Why didn't you tell me? She held his gaze for a long moment. Because I didn't know what it would cost us. A beat. I didn't know yet whether you were the kind of person who would want to know. That sentence sat between them. He felt the weight of it. Not as an accusation but as something honest and entirely fair. She had needed to be sure of him before she trusted him with the thing that could break apart his family. She had been waiting to be sure of him, and she had been waiting alone. He nodded slowly. The cedar box, he said. Is it still there? Yes. He looked at Iris. Then I think we'll be making a call to Dunmore and Kessler ourselves. As the estate's rightful representatives. He picked up his briefcase, set it back down. And I think we need to talk about the East Wing. Iris's chin came up. What about it? I think it's time for you to have a home of your own, mother. Something appropriate, something nearby. I'll help you find it. But this arrangement, the way it's been, it's over. Iris's expression didn't crumble. She wasn't the kind of woman whose face crumbled. But something moved through it, a flicker of something. Not grief, not even anger, but a kind of recognition. The recognition of someone who understands for the first time that the usual tools no longer apply. She left the kitchen without another word. Declan stood in the quiet that followed and listened to his mother's footsteps on the old oak floors until he couldn't hear them anymore. Then he looked at Maisie. She hadn't moved from the window. She still had one hand on the counter, one on her abdomen. Her expression was careful and a little tired, in the way of someone who has been holding themselves together in a specific posture for so long that they've almost forgotten how to stand any other way. You should have told me, he said. Not as a reprimand, as something closer to grief. I know I would have wanted to know. I wasn't sure. She paused. I'm sorry. I should have trusted you sooner. He crossed the kitchen and sat down at the old pine table near the window. The table that had been in the Fontaine family since before Maisie was born. The one her mother had refused to replace no matter how many times they'd renovated the house. He sat in the chair that faced her, not beside her, facing her, because there were things that needed to be said directly. I've been absent, he said, not in the obvious ways. I've been here, but I've been managing the surface of things. Telling myself everything was fine because nothing was visibly breaking. That's not the same as being present. Maisie looked at him. I heard enough tonight, he said, but I think there's more I don't know and I want to know it, all of it, if you'll tell me. She was quiet for a long time. The kitchen settled around them. The tick of the old regulator clock on the wall. The faint creak of the house in the October wind. The particular silence of a home that has held generations of other people's lives and will go on holding things long after tonight. Then Maisie pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. It started, she said, the week after we moved in. He listened. Not the way he usually listened, with half his attention on the problem, the fix, the thing he could do about it, but fully, in the way he should have been listening all along. She didn't dramatize. She never dramatized. She told him about the comments over breakfast, the redirected deliveries, the constant low-level implication that she was a temporary arrangement in a house that had been standing long before her. She told him about the day Iris Holt had sat across from her in this exact kitchen and explained, in her warm, reasonable voice, that the partnership documentation she'd mentioned to a mutual acquaintance was not something that would serve anyone's interest to resurface. She told him about being 6 weeks pregnant and standing in the upstairs hallway at midnight listening to a phone call that was not meant to be overheard. She told him all of it. He didn't interrupt, he didn't explain away. He sat at the old pine table in the kitchen, his wife had grown up in, and he listened until she was done. When she finished it was past 11, the house was still. Somewhere down the hall a door had closed. The letters in the cedar box, Declan said. Have you had them reviewed? By a notary, not a lawyer. She paused. They're genuine, the signatures are dated. One of them specifically outlines a profit-sharing agreement on the Chambertin returns. She folded her hands on the table. My mother never asked for it. She and your father were. They were friends, I think. Real ones, and she trusted that it would be honored eventually. It should have been. Yes, Maisie said simply, it should have been. He reached across the table. She looked at his hand for a moment before she took it. Not with the automatic ease of habit but with the deliberateness of a choice. And that difference mattered to him. I'm going to make this right, he said. I know. She said it without performance. That's why I told you where the box was. In the weeks that followed, the east wing of the house in Rockcliffe Park was quietly emptied. Iris Holt moved to a large and well-appointed unit in a building on the Rideau River that Declan arranged and paid for without drama, because the drama was finished. She did not speak to Maisie directly during the transition. She did not apologize. Declan had stopped expecting that she would, and he had stopped needing it in the way he once might have. The legal matter was handled by a firm Maisie selected, not Dunmore and Kessler, who had declined the file when it became clear what was in it, but a smaller practice in the glebe staffed by 2 women who had spent their careers on estate recovery work. The letters, along with an old accounting ledger Maisie found beneath a false bottom in the same cedar box, were sufficient to establish the nature of the original agreement. The settlement, reached privately and without litigation, returned to Maisie's estate, a portion of the Chambertin returns, that had been quietly redirected to Holt Capital, in the years following her parents' deaths. It was not everything her parents had been owed. It was enough to acknowledge that something had been taken. Declan told his siblings. He had expected resistance. His brother gave it briefly and then not at all. His sister was the one who surprised him. She had known, or half known, in the way that families sometimes know things by unanimous agreement not to look directly at them. She apologized to Maisie in person, in the kitchen, over tea she made herself, and the apology was plain and undecorated and it counted for something. The child arrived in January, on a morning when snow was falling in the particular heavy way it falls over Ottawa when the temperature is right at freezing, the flakes large and slow and quiet. A girl. They named her after Maisie's mother. A name that meant something, that came from somewhere, that the house in Rockcliffe Park would now hold along with everything else. Declan sat in the hospital room and watched Maisie sleep and thought about the way that the worst moments of a marriage are sometimes also the ones that tell you whether it's real. Not the celebrations. Not the easy years. The moments when you are standing in a doorway you weren't supposed to come through, and you hear the true shape of something you had been pretending not to see. He had pretended for too long. He knew that. He would know it for the rest of his life. But he had come home early on a night when he wasn't supposed to be there at all, and he had stood in the doorway instead of walking away, and something, a quiet instinct, the kind you learn not to ignore, had made him stay. The snow kept falling outside the hospital window. The city went white and still. Inside the room the baby made a small sound in her bassinet, and Maisie opened her eyes and Declan Holt was already watching.